Welcome back to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. Thanks for being with us. This edition is made possible by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alan Kornhauser. Hi, Alan.
Hey, hi, Fred.
Great to see you, and joining us for this episode once again from Sweden, we are happy to see consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher, Michael Sena. Hi, Michael.
Good evening. Pleasure to be here.
It is evening, certainly in Sweden, is it not?
It is. So, it's dark.
And before we get started, we want to congratulate the men's and women's basketball teams at Princeton University, doing great in the NCAAs.
Absolutely. Here we go. Tonight the women play and hopefully make it to the Sweet 16.
Like the men have done.
Absolutely.
With a really impressive win over Missouri.
And we have a wrestling champion for the first time since 1951, plus the pole vault champion in track and field. So, I mean, look.
What's going on there?
My goodness. Number one institution and some athletes.
Well, on top in our podcast today, the International Telecommunication Union Symposium on the Future Network Car, which took place this past week. Michael, you were among the speakers who took part. Lots of other great representation as well, including Cruise, NVIDIA, Einride, many more, including our friend Missy Cummings. Tell us more about the symposium. Yeah,
I was one of the moderators. We had 4 sessions, each one 3 hours from afternoon, 3 hours of starting on Monday through Thursday. Monday was principally the regulators. My session was on automotive artificial intelligence. That was on Tuesday. We had a general automation session that was chaired by or moderated by Roger Langtot on Wednesday, and then Russ Shields had communications on Thursday. So I listened to them all, 3 hours each day, including listening to my own session. And it was worth the time. I mean, it's the nice thing about the ITU Future Network Car Symposium that's been going on now for many years, 16, 17 years now, and usually is held in conjunction with the Geneva Motor Show. But for the last 3 years, the Geneva Motor Show hasn't happened, firstly because of COVID and then for other reasons. So it's been virtual for the last 3 years. It's not one of these, you get on there and you give a company pitch and then you have some questions and you're talking mostly about your company. This symposium is geared to topic, focusing on the topic, not on the companies, discussing issues related to the topic, whether it's communication or artificial intelligence. And this year was no exception. So I felt very good about our session. Missy Cummings gave the keynote speech, and as usual, did a fantastic job. And we had a very good panel discussion. Now, when you're talking about automotive artificial intelligence, there isn't very much that's actually being done because we don't have cars on the roads that are driving themselves. But we have a lot of research that's going on. And as the panelists said, we have a lot of research that's not going on, that we need to focus on some areas that we maybe are not focusing on right now. But it's getting a lot of attention, particularly when you hear about things like Chat GPT and how it's going to take over everybody's job, and it's going to write everybody's songs and produce everybody's artwork and put Alan out of a job because he won't have any teaching to do, because kids won't need teaching. They just ask Chat GPT to give them the answer, and then that'll be the end of that. Right, Alan? He's nodding. So
I was muted. Because, of course, you don't want my comment on it.
ChatGPT muted you.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, how are the students going to ask the questions if they don't have any education? In fact, the education is to have you ask better questions. Answers, go to Google or whatever once you know the question. But never mind.
It seems like we just learned about ChatGPT 3, and now 4 is out there. That's supposedly many times more capable.
Well,
I'm not
many
sure.
times more. Many times 0 is still 0, Fred. Okay.
But this may be surprising.
Go ahead.
during the 4 days, I think the term ChatGPT came up perhaps 3 times, and I think I said it twice. So it wasn't top of mind during the symposium. Do you have any specific questions?
I was going to point out that Missy Cummings posted on LinkedIn after the sessions that be sure to check out my talk that made me persona non grata with pretty much everyone in the transportation community. Sorry, but someone has to call out the emperor with no clothes. That was her post.
I mean, come on. I still champion her. I thought she was great. I thought she was very, very forthcoming, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, so do I, and I think in this particular instance, there were probably 90% of the people were very sympathetic and open to what she was saying. There's probably people in the Wednesday session from companies we won't name, but maybe they weren't too happy with what she was saying. But I think most people were very, very receptive to what Missy was saying, because she was saying, these are the areas that we need to do some more work on. But one of the things that she mentioned, she started out with, and I think I have exactly the same experience in my work, not related to driverless software, but in the work that I've been doing over the last 25 years with the automotive industry. She said there are too many coding mistakes. A lot of inexperienced and careless programmers are working, and they think they're working on software that's going to go into a PC or something that people are going to beta test like they do everybody else's software. They don't have any experience working in the automotive industry. And she said something else, which I totally agree with, because I have exactly the same experience. A lot of people are coming into the programming, the automotive programming, and don't have a driver's license. They don't really know what driving a car is about, but they come in and think, well, I've done all of these videos, and I've been really good at getting all my points in the video programs, but they've never actually gone behind the wheel of a car. And many of them are too young, even if they have, to have the kind of experience that's necessary to understand all of the nuances. So I think maybe that got a few people's hackles up, but totally support it.
And of course, I agree with you. And I had a company once for a long time, and I guess my main job, I think, was to figure out, try to point people who were doing the coding as to where they made coding mistakes, and where the thing is giving results. That how'd you get this? And I would try to go back and point out, you must have done this. Check it out. And I continue to think that, in the software that's out there in cars with respect to driver assistance on the one hand and automated emergency braking on the other. Fred, week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had a podcast with chief engineer from General Motors. Those two things don't talk to each other.
Cruise, right.
They don't talk to each other. So here you have an automated advanced driver assistance on this end of the collision imminent spectrum, and the automated emergency braking on the other end of the imminent collision, 1.6 seconds to collision, and nothing in between. And they don't talk to each other, apparently. Who codes stuff like that? Cut it out. They might use the same LiDARs, SMIDARs, WIDARs, gizmos, whatever, but apparently they don't talk to each other. Whoa, are you kidding? And apparently it's, they should. Cut it out. This is a continuum, from, hey, nothing's about to happen. I can go to sleep. I can go hop in the back seat, level 3. Forget about it. Okay? All the way down to 1.6 second to collision. Because these things do compute, hopefully well, what the time to collision is every 30th of a second. Because that's, holy hell, we got to start doing something. And so, but they don't talk to, are you kidding me? And I keep saying out there that I think embedded in all this AI, shmai, black box, that they implicitly disregard stationary objects ahead. Implicitly. Why should they? Because in the training sets, guess what? There are a lot of objects over here in the training set that are stationary objects. Telephone poles, overhead trees, signs up ahead, traffic lights, who knows what. And guess what each of those is labeled as in the training set? Hey, forget about it. You aren't going to hit it. And guess what the darn things get trained on? Who? If it's a stationary object, I ain't going to hit it. What? Are you joking? I bet. People think I'm crazy, guys. So, look, I thought that when Missy made that comment, that's probably, one of the best comments I've heard in any talk. I mean, why they call bugs in code? It's from day one, from IBM 0, from who knows what, COBOL, who knows what. I don't know why it didn't work there. Whatever. Did I forget a semicolon? And unless you are absolutely diligent at questioning almost everything that comes out of these things, guess what? Some things are in there that all of a sudden at some point it gets spooked and it starts applying the darn brakes or doesn't apply the brakes. What are you going to, I don't know. I guess I'm crazy guy. Missy, I'm joining you and everybody hates me too.
Michael, tell us what your thoughts are following up to Alain, and if there are other takeaways or themes from the symposium. Yeah,
well, as I said, I totally agree with it, because that's the experience I had was so often in testing software that would go into particularly the communications, the telematics, so-called telematics. Suddenly something was working, and then you trace it back, and it's a software error. The other issue that it did come up, not in the context of artificial intelligence, but it came up as a theme in other sessions, was the possibility of remote driving. We said first in our session, Missy said, and others said exactly the same thing, that the idea of someone sitting someplace like in Boise, Idaho, flying a drone that's going over the Black Sea, this doesn't work in cars. The latency is too much. There's no possibility for someone to sit somewhere and drive a vehicle. And this came up with it turns out, a misunderstanding that probably was promoted as a misunderstanding by Einride, saying, they're driving their trucks remotely. Well, it turns out when we really pushed on this subject, their trucks are being driven in a driverless mode until they get close to the destination, or until from the time that they're leaving, very, very close to where they're starting, at very low speeds, where a driver doesn't have to worry too much about latency, and probably not on public roads, or if they are, they're not much traffic. So this issue came up many, many times, and essentially said, the idea of having someone driving a vehicle, whether it's a truck or a car, remotely it's a non-starter. And this is also something that Missy had said in her opening statement. Waymo's not doing it. Cruise isn't doing it. They're not driving their cars remotely. They have remote assistance, where if the car gets in trouble, you can send a message. You see what's going on. You can say to the car, okay, you can go over the line, the separation between the lanes. So that was another one that came up. I think.
Well, on that line, sort of the answer I give to that when that question is brought to me is, I always use the elevator analogy. The elevator operates automatically, but firemen and policemen have a key that can get in there and actually operate the elevator locally, okay, under extreme circumstances, slowly and whatever. And as Michael pointed out, if you should reach a situation in which the car needs to be pulled over to the side of the road on the breakdown lane or something like that, you could do that remotely. Okay, where there's low speed, really low speed, not much chance of a collision. But what gets me the most about that doesn't exist in remote operation is, I'll call it the tactile feedback, although it's not, in touch. It's the whole perception of what's going on that the brain and the human does when one is going down the road, that unfortunately I don't think you can replicate in an office environment, even if you put accelerations on the seat and whatever, and they have these sort of you can fly a 747 and the whole thing goes up and down and so on. I had the opportunity to do that once. I tried to land a 747 in London Heathrow, and I crashed the sucker. I mean, I had no chance. Of course, it's in the simulator. And I tried this in the Ford simulator. They have one of these things for cars and theirs, and it drove me nuts. I couldn't drive the car. Why? Because my host was standing right next to me outside the car, and my peripheral vision could see him. And it made my mind say, oh my goodness, what is going on here? This is nothing like driving down a road. What's this guy doing standing here in my peripheral vision? And it drove me nuts. And I've never been able to, I've tried, and without having this, whatever it is, I'll call it tactile, but I guess there's a probably better name for it. I should know it. That's going on, that when you're in that driver's seat, it is substantially different than sitting in an office environment, even if you are wrapped around with, 360 screens all over the darn place and whatever. And then there's the latency, and then there's everything else, and forget about it. It's a heck of a lot easier to do a drone that's one off, and and if a Soviet fighter drops gasoline on you, who cares if you lose it? Whatever. jet fuel,
Michael,
whatever they did.
Michael, let me ask you, with the symposium this year, was there a difference in the atmosphere after what happened with Argo and so many of the layoffs taking place in the tech world today?
No. And the only session where there was a high density was Roger Langtut's session, and he would have had to lead that, because no one was going to sit there and say, we're in trouble. The fact these companies are going out of business, they weren't going to discuss that, and Roger didn't go there. I mean, he led them in his presentation and in his questions to try to discuss the issues. So this wasn't intended to be, and never has been intended to be, about the companies, about what how well they're doing as companies, what their business plan and business cases are. That's not what the Future Network Car Symposium is intended for. It's intended to discuss issues that need to be addressed principally by the UNECE, WP29, standardization activities like the cybersecurity, over-the-air updating, automatic lane keeping systems, and so on, to lead the discussion. So our job, and the ones, we've seen this, and I've taken this to heart. Our job is to try to identify the issues that are important to people who aren't working in the industry, such as the regulators, so that they begin to understand some of the technical issues that have to be addressed. And then for those people who are working in the industry, to help them to understand that this is bigger than just one pipe, one smokestack, that these issues have to be discussed directly, and try to lead the discussion for standardization. And that's our job. That's what we, as moderators, are that's what we see as our main objective. So any discussions about whether Argo goes out of business, or VW is going to take over Ford, or anything of that sort, just doesn't have a place in the symposium. And I think that's good, because there's plenty of other places where those things can be discussed.
So, Michael, I think one of the topics, I hope I'm not mixing things up, but one of the topics that was discussed was cooperating on safety, on the issue of safety, and as opposed to competing on safety, and how one can engender cooperation on safety. Any comments on that, or? With respect to a regulatory, or maybe I'm mixing it up with another discussion that I
don't know. Did you listen into to Russ's session on
I did not.
Communication?
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That didn't come into the discussions on Wednesday. I didn't bring it up in my session on Tuesday and the automotive artificial intelligence. It may have come up during the 3 hours, but it wasn't a main point. I mean, the problem that we have with I think there's a general problem, and we did discuss this in our session. We have, with the United States and China, we have two countries that are not doing pre-certification, mm-hmm. Even though, if you really look at how the United States works, there is a certain degree of pre-certification, because each one of the car companies has to perform the tests, as opposed to the tests being performed by testing agencies, as is the case in Japan and all of the EU. In the United States, it's the car companies who have to perform the test, so that they can say, yes, our systems are they are according to the specifications that are established within NHTSA. It's not like we have a kind of a free-for-all and everybody just throws out their car and everything. There are standards, there are regulations that the cars have to perform in a certain way, and these are These are laws. This is a law, and it's not state law. This is NHTSA, the federal highway regulations. So the car companies have to certify, and they have to do the tests. In Europe, tests are performed on components and on the whole vehicle, and they get a certification from a testing agency, whether it's in the Netherlands or in Sweden or Germany. They get a certification, and that means that the car can be operated anywhere within the EU and all those other countries which are in accordance with this. So it's not like we don't have certification, but it's not a certificate that you get. But if the car doesn't, if you find out that the car isn't actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, then NHTSA brings the car in. The car is tested, and if it fails, they say, well, what did you do wrong? Did you actually test this? Can you show us what you did to show us that you actually did test this and this is a one-off situation? Or was the testing, where was the problem? So it would make much more sense if we had one way of doing things, and the United States got on board with the pre-certification so that we had a testing agency that tested all the vehicles. And this is going to be much more important when we start to get vehicles that are out there doing things we not necessarily have tested for in the beginning. So that was one issue that we discussed, and that came up I think in all of the sessions, the idea of type approval.
So in the type approval is, I guess, appropriate when you're dealing with a physical thing like a wheel or a
no. It's the next issue of the dispatcher. I'll have this specifically in there because this is even more important when you're discussing something that's not just a brake lining or a connection here. It's even more important when you're discussing how software, particularly software that where a human's not necessarily involved. Right. And there's a lot of work that's being done, standardization work that's now being done, that's going into ISO, it's going into UNECE, where a combination of cybersecurity and over-the-air updating requires some form of certification that says, yes, this has been done. How is it working? We're going to test it, and we're going to test it virtually. We're going to test it physically. We're going to test it, in a lab, but we're also going to test it on the road. This is even more important, and it's going to be more important as we do more and more automated programming.
Right, and this is what Mercedes, I guess, has done, or Daimler's done, with respect to their so-called Level 3 in Germany, and the testing agency has gone out there, I guess, and driven on the Autobahns, which is where their operational design domain, in the speeds and the traffic conditions and maybe the weather conditions in which you're talking about. And I guess they found that they didn't go boom. I mean, that it worked, right? I mean, that's the process that went through there, which is, now just going through that certification for that particular small operational design domain, which I guess others will then go, and as they increase the operational design domain, the testing agency is going to have to go out there and perform those maneuvers, those drives, those whatever. I guess they'll have kids throwing balls out there in front and diving in and running their bike. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean that's the whole fundamental question. How do you once the operational design domain starts to get larger, because right now it's really pretty darn small, but that's fine. I mean, you have to start someplace. Start there. Then the certification agencies are actually going to go out there and certify that and put their rubber stamp and say, hey, yeah, it worked. What happens when it doesn't work? Who's then? Where does the liability fall? if all of a sudden they forgot, they didn't test that, or I don't know. I mean, it's non-simple, right?
No, it's not. This is not trivial.
Yeah.
And companies that say, well, we can drive anywhere in Texas or Arizona or Nevada with our cars without drivers in them, and we can, there's nothing preventing us from doing that. I heard that from 3 different companies on Wednesday. And I'm thinking, this is interesting. There are laws that every state in the United States, all 50 states, are subject to the laws and requirements and the regulations that have been established by the UN and have been incorporated into the United States. These laws are very clear about what can and what cannot be done. But if these are people who are supposedly in charge of each one of these companies' regulations, the department that's government regulations, and they're saying publicly, we can do whatever we want. There's no law preventing us from going out there and driving our cars around and without drivers. Oh, really? Okay. So why is it that this one company that actually does have software and it is selling to cars to companies, to individuals, but telling them that they have to keep their hands on the wheel? Oh, there's a mismatch here. There's a disconnect somewhere here. One group of companies are all saying, we can do basically whatever we want. We don't have to have a steering wheel. We don't have to have people in there. We can drive these cars. And that's what they said on Wednesday. And then there's the reality of another company being put up now, being investigated by NHTSA because people have not followed the directions which the company had established, which is, yes, this car will drive itself, but you have to be alert. You have to have your hands on the steering wheel. You have to be ready to do whatever is necessary to take control of this vehicle if it doesn't perform. So there's something's wrong here. Either these people are misinformed, or they're perfectly right, and tomorrow we're going to have all these cars driving anywhere in the United States on any road because there's nothing to prevent them from doing that. That's what they said.
Well, that's interesting, Michael. I mean, one of the stories that we had planned to talk about today is a headline that came from Fortune, and it says, Cruise says it doesn't need a green light from NHTSA to test its autonomous Origin shuttle on Texas roads. I mean, Alan, we've talked about NHTSA not giving the approval in a timely manner for this from your perspective. So this sounds like there are UN regulations to contend with.
Well, I think it's misrepresentation. The testing, I think all of the testing, essentially, I think all of the testing has a human in the vehicle ready to intervene, maybe not with a steering wheel, but with a joystick or with a whatever other mechanism to address the throttle, brake, and steering, and to do that essentially instantaneously. And I've, of course, argued that no testing should ever really go on public roads without human oversight in the vehicle ready to take over. Why would you take that risk? I mean, something, yeah, right?
Hey, what we know that cruise vehicles have gotten themselves, they've gotten themselves in trouble in the middle of San Francisco,
right?
A number of times when there's been absolutely no one in the vehicle.
Absolutely, but that's not testing.
What is that?
That's operation. That's running a business.
But there's nobody in the vehicle.
Right, they're repositioning it to the next ride.
And so Cruise is right now in the business of running driverless vehicles in San Francisco.
Right, Cruise and Waymo, to my knowledge, are the only two entities in the world. Maybe there's another one in China, although I have questions about that, so let's leave China out of it for now, that are operating as a business proposition of providing mobility with no driver or attendant in the vehicle, which is the objective of driverless. The objective of driverless is to do a business where you don't have to pay for the driver. The advantage of driverless is not safety. I mean, they count safety. Get out of here. Okay, just make it as safe as just make it as safe as. The opportunity is to provide the mobility, the on-demand, demand responsive mobility affordably. And why is it affordable? Is because you don't have to pay for the driver to wait and to drive. Otherwise, Uber, Lyft, and bankruptcy, and no affordable mobility. I mean, that's the reason for driverless. My view. I think some others adhere to that. And so if you're testing to see if your stuff works, which is why you test, then absolutely have somebody in there, oh my goodness, to take over. Because you're not trying to, this isn't part of, return on investment, profitability, whatever, stock prices or anything. It's getting the sucker to work.
Yeah, but there have been incidents involving crews. I don't know if Waymo's had incidents, but I know there have been incidents involving crews where the cars have gotten stuck, and they've had to send people out to do something.
Sure.
To get the cars off the roads.
Sure, and in all those, each of those instances, Cruise and Waymo, they each have, they have a big pipe in and out of those vehicles, and they sit there and watch them. And there's somebody remote who, if the thing gets stuck, can jiggle or whatever, or get it unstuck, and maybe they'll have to send AAA out there with a hook and do it. Just like when my car gets stuck, I got to call AAA. I mean, same business here. It's going to happen. Can't expect it to work all the time. All right? That's that. But when you're testing, you got to have a person in there. I mean, would any company be stupid enough to send it out there? And what are you trying to gain by not having anybody in there to take over in case something bad happens, or to make more easy to move it over to the side of the road and get it out of trouble, or to say to the cop or whoever pulled you over, hey, things are cool here, we're just testing. Okay, you have to, I don't know, be insane to send those things out there without an attendant. But when you're doing it as a business and trying to provide mobility out there affordably, and trying to be responsible to your investors and your fiduciary responsibility as a business, then that expense of having that person, you want to get out of this. And if that's not the objective that we're trying to do, is reduce the expense of providing the mobility, then we've got nothing. Then we're still in what we've had for the last 50, the last 100 years. And the problem with what we've had for the last 50 or 100 years is there's as Robin Chase said in the MIT's mobility symposium last Friday, at any instant of time, there are 50% of the people in the U.S. who don't have mobility to go anywhere other than walking. At any instant of time, 50%. That includes the too young, the too old, the too poor, the too whatever, the other people in the household, in households that have one car but they don't have a car available to them, 50%. So it's not a small number of people who, my goodness, if you had this mobility out there, which if you get to any kind of productivity with the vehicle costs nothing. And then if you do it, I guess, with electricity, then somebody's going to say the electricity costs nothing. And the maintenance costs nothing. And we already have the infrastructure, and so the incremental cost of the infrastructure. And so now you have the opportunity for affordability, which Uber and Lyft can't give you, because they have the burden of providing a living wage to the entity that's sitting around waiting for you and sitting around driving you and chauffeuring you.
Alan, I think that's a good lead into this report, study commissioned by the National Disability Institute, reported by Axios. A headline being, autonomous cars could help millions of disabled Americans find jobs. It was commissioned by GM-owned Cruise. It points out only 21% of Americans with disabilities participated in the labor force in 2021, compared to 67% of those without disabilities. And it's saying if reliable, affordable, self-driving transportation was widely available, about 9.2 million more Americans would join the workforce.
It's not just that. You know, we're, with our Trenton Moves project, we're working with this group called Arc Mercer that provides mobility to challenged individuals, just to be able to live their lives during the day, to get out of the house, to go to a place where maybe there's some learning, some training, some enjoyment, some whatever, to keep them from being, stuck in a place. Their mobility challenges are unbelievable, because they have to have a bunch of people sitting around just be able, and then they have to schedule this and the scheduling and whatever. And now you've got to make sure that the person that's driving also has time to go to the bathroom and have their lunch and work in the hours and what to do and all the other stuff they have to do. And if you have an autistic person, that you also need an assistant in the vehicle, you might have thought, well, maybe the driver can provide double duty. No, they can't, because they have to be driving. So you have to have two people and schedule two people to get them from where they live to maybe a group activity place on the other side of town. And so the disability community has unbelievable mobility needs that right now are provided by chauffeurs. And they have to be, and chauffeurs are expensive. They're expensive in Downton Abbey, and they're expensive in Trenton, New Jersey. And now you have the opportunity to provide some mobility that at least, you schedule the vehicle, boom, it's an algorithm. You make sure the code's written right, you're empty repositioning, and you have it just available, and you have it available 24/7. And for those that are able to get in and out by themselves, great. For those that need assistance getting in and getting out, guess what? They have assistance at both ends that can help them get in and get out. And if they need assistance during the trip, at least then it only takes one person instead of two. And this is all the expense of moving one of these people is just extraordinary. And when you look at the level of service that's being offered, people are working very hard, very diligently to try to make that happen. But that is non-simple. So these are also opportunities that are available. But there are opportunities that are available because now you can chop one of the labor components of this thing. And it's not only the time that you're doing the driving, it's the time you're waiting around and being empty repositioned and all the other stuff that needs to be going on in the front and back end of each of these trips that requires an individual. And if you should pay union scale and you should pay a living wage, guess what? That's expensive. And if we still need attendant on board, we'd make zero progress, except now have to pay for a LiDAR or a camera or a computer in the vehicle too. forget about it. Sorry.
A couple of other headlines to touch on quickly, Alan. There's a report that Kroger has partnered with Gatik to use self-driving trucks to carry goods between a fulfillment center in Texas and various stores. The routes average about 60 miles round trip. And we've seen this before. There are safety drivers involved here.
I believe so. Okay? I mean, while you can pick up a lot of things that are written in Sunday supplements and so on, that when you first look at them, they don't say anything about an attendant on board. As far as I know, in the continental United States, there are only 2 entities that do things driverlessly in 2 places, San Francisco and Phoenix, Waymo and Cruise. Under what operational design domains, geographic, fencing, weather, whatever related, traffic. I've tried to talk to somebody from Waymo and ask them, please tell me about your operational design domain. Well, nobody wants to talk to me there, so I guess I don't know what it is. Okay, but I bet it's not everywhere.
Right.
But maybe it is great. Go. But if it is, why aren't you delivering more trips with these things? Why? I mean, have you been running so few of them out there that you've only really by now only amassed 1 million miles? You've contributed nothing. Well, I mean, you made the big leap of putting vehicles out there without anybody in them. Now, I don't know if you've had chase vehicles out there and people, riding on the fender or something like that, or, I don't think we were taking a picture of you, or, what you do to basically, cover your whatevers in case something happens. I do know that you have remote centers in which you watch these, and I'm sure you have people sitting watching closely. And you've done a fantastic job. What was it? The report that was put out by Waymo a couple weeks ago of the 20 incidents that they've had, which include bicyclists running into them, or people in parking lots backing into them when they're parked. Okay, what the most challenging one of those things was when they got rear-ended when they're slowing down for a red light at an intersection by someone who's looking at their cell phone. I got rear-ended by somebody who wasn't paying attention. I saw him coming. I looked in my rearview mirror. I saw him coming. Luckily, I let off my brake because I was stopped there. Because otherwise, I don't know. I think luckily I let off my brake. All it did was damage my car. I mean, that stuff happens. Is that my fault for, waiting to make a left turn from while the traffic clears? I don't know. No, the answer is.
But Fred,
go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, your question was related to a truck, right? You were talking about trucks?
Mm-hmm. Yes. He's talking about box trucks.
Yeah, and that
not
that
Class 8s.
These trucks are being driven around, and there was some maybe understanding or misunderstanding that these were actually being driven around in a driverless mode. Was that the question? Is that?
I think that's a misunderstanding. I don't believe they are, but
okay.
Hopefully somebody correct me.
Well,
I could be wrong.
Well, they are supposedly. The story is that they're making deliveries from I guess, a warehouse type facility, 2 supermarkets in driverless mode, but with a safety driver on board.
Okay. All right. So the trucks are being, the trucks, they're doing what they're doing. The truck is driving itself, but there's somebody there to take over in case the truck doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll make the outlandish comment that in fact, this is more expensive goods delivery, because now I've had to put who knows what gizmos on my vehicle and who knows what computers on my vehicle, and I've had a person in there anyway. Okay,
and who's the
apparently
software?
this
still qualifies, I suppose, as testing.
Yeah,
which
yes,
said before,
it is testing. At best, it's testing. Yes,
and who's providing the vehicles and the software? What's the company that's doing this?
I think it's Gatik.
Correct.
Yeah, Gatik's been doing it with Walmart in Arkansas or something like that. And yes, and it is testing to see if, in fact, they get to a point in which there are no disengagements. I mean, our whole design concept with respect to Trenton Moves, or the Moves concept, is that we would operate with an attendant on board for a specific amount of time, okay, and wouldn't even think about taking away the attendant unless we got to a situation in which there were essentially no disengagements in the operational design domain. So therefore, we could deem the stuff to work. And 2, the people were willing to get in there and ride. And in fact, sort of a precursor to anybody participating with us, which is maybe the reason why nobody's decided to want to participate with us yet, or has been knocking on our doors here, please, let's do it right now, is because our expectation is that the technology, the person who brings the vehicle in there, has a system that almost from the get-go in the operational design domain that we've established there, whatever that happens to be, okay, the system works. Definition of system works. We can operate for, whatever number of times between all origin and destination through the distribution of weather and whatever, without any disengagements. What's a disengagement? It's the driver saying, oh my goodness. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the thing works and there are no booms. Okay?
Yeah,
so there's getting enough experience such that it... Yeah, go ahead.
There's no intention of putting the cars out there without an attendant in them, correct?
Every intention of, after a point in which the cars do work, that it does go out there and without an attendant, and not only that the cars work, there are 2 pieces. There's a technological piece, which we're assuming there have been $200 billion spent on this stuff. It doesn't work yet? I mean, come on, guys. All right? We're assuming it's going to work, especially in the simple operational design domain that I'll call it simple, that we would have for a Trenton. Okay? But also that the people who are going to ride on there are going to be comfortable to get in that elevator without an elevator operator. Okay? I mean, and if they're not, then we have to have the attendant. And if we have to have the attendant, then, we could have done that 50 years ago. We could have done that 75 years ago. We don't need all the gizmos. We don't need all the AI. We don't need any of that stuff. We'll just get good old, human brains to do it. Why put on that other expense? We're trying to eliminate the human brain expense, because that's the big one. It really is. The technology piece should be really small when you get right down, especially with scale. And if it's not going to be small, then we should forget about even, venturing out into this. To me, those are the motivating factors. Then
there's one other, Alan, that I know you have questions about, and we hope to have them on with us to maybe answer some of those questions. Electric has a headline saying Baidu in China has robo-taxis offering full driverless rides. Not sure what that means when it comes to attendance. And they are the headline says, continue to take over China. They're now in Beijing as well as 2 other major cities.
If I had a technology that could operate in an operational design domain like Beijing, I would replicate that by the gazillions. And for each one, I would have people riding it because it'd be so cheap. I can go out there and compete with Didi. I can compete with and I could be giving high quality mobility. I would have customers standing in line if I could do that. Okay. It seems as if what they have in the article that a vehicle is giving 20 rides a day. 20 rides a day? There are 24 hours in a day. In Beijing, people move around all 24 hours. Maybe not so many in 3 o'clock in the morning. Are you kidding me? The productivity of these vehicles is less than 1 ride per hour? What are you sitting around with this asset that supposedly provides all this mobility that in fact has nothing but fixed costs associated with it, essentially no variable costs, that you could price at practically nothing and still make money, and your productivity is less than one ride per hour? I don't get it. How many millions of people, how many whatever millions of trips are made in Beijing every day? I mean, this is a big market, and you have the opportunity to serve it from short walk to short walk. And your productivity is less than 1 trip per hour. What are you doing? I don't know.
Well,
I don't get it. I
guess
that's an advanced concept.
Yeah.
I'm still in grade school, children. I don't understand.
Well, hopefully they'll be joining us in the not too distant future.
I guess they won't after I ask that question because I don't know. I'm sorry. Sorry to misbehave. Really. I mean, I don't mean to misbehave, but I just think this isn't no, I won't ask ChatGPT, because it doesn't know anything. So
what would you ask it?
I have no idea.
What kind of question would you
I would
ask
it to go away. I don't know. Hey, well, apparently, it doesn't apparently have any data for the last 2 years because, to basically solve the optimization problem to determine the optimal value of all the coefficients is non-trivial, and they don't run that every day and whatever. And so, and who knows how much of they didn't load in any information from Beijing, I guess. So it wouldn't know.
Well, this has been a great edition of Chat ALK.
Yeah. Well, at least everybody knows which direction I'm coming from. Okay, because I am biased. I mean, that's the beauty of each of us, is that we are different. We are, by that difference, biased.
Michael, we want to thank you for spending time with us once again.
My pleasure.
Especially on a Sunday.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I don't know. We have a good, and again, wonderful session, and I put the links in Smart Driving Cars, and it's as Michael said, it's really worth sitting through. And also, I'd also like to point out Robin Chase's presentation last Friday in the MIT mobility symposium or whatever it is. It was also fantastic, and as we've discussed, this business of having the way to save the planet is to have everybody have their own personal car and not be electrified instead of something else is really a questionable policy direction, and Robin just, I mean, she was just great.
Terrific. Well, that's been a great series overall.
Yeah, and of course I linked mine also from the first time, so in case anybody wants to go back and look at that thing. I don't know. I thought it was good for whatever that matters.
Well done, Alan.
Thanks.
So, thank you to CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, for helping to make this podcast possible. CARTS is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, wherever you turn to for podcasts. Smart Speaker can play us too. You can find my tech reports at textination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alan Kornhauser. Thanks for listening or watching. Please continue to stay safe. Have a great week ahead.
And continue to cheer for the Tigers in March Madness, both the men's and the women's. Women's tonight at 7:10 p.m. Eastern.